Hello, beautiful souls. Today we're diving into one of the most ancient and powerful sacred symbols, the spiral. Spirals show up everywhere. They're one of the most ancient symbols that we have. You can find them in nature and in artwork all over the world and from all ages. Spirals speak to the cycles of life and the cycles of nature. They also symbolize the vital life force that flows within everything. And because of this, it's also a symbol for universal consciousness and for creativity and the creative process, which is why we often see it in connection with goddess imagery in the womb. So we're going to go deeper into all of this in this video, but first, let's talk about the two types of spirals. A spiral can either go clockwise or counterclockwise, and they each have specific meanings. So, a clockwise spiral, we can think of it as a positive spiral with positive or yang energy. And these are usually about expansion and growth. A counterclockwise spiral is more yin, it's about going within, and sometimes about releasing or letting go. A spiral spinning counterclockwise is one that encourages inner work and going within, and it also symbolizes purification, throwing off that which you no longer need. So the spiral speaks of duality. You can see it in the positive and negative spiral shapes that form when you draw a spiral, but it also shows us that duality coming together as oneness, the shape of the spiral as a whole. So here we have the energies of duality, yin and yang, and the energy of oneness, which represents universal mind, combined with a dynamic sense of movement. And it's no wonder that the spiral represents life itself, the vital life force that animates all beings and powers growth and evolution. Even the building blocks of life itself, our DNA, shows up in the shape of a double helix or double spiral. This is also why the spiral is associated with spiritual awakening and the Kundalini. In this aspect, it often appears as a snake coiled up at the base of the spine and traveling up the spine during the process of spiritual awakening or spiritual evolution. You might wish to check out my video on the Unalome, another sacred symbol based on the spiral, for more insight into this aspect of spiral symbolism, along with my video on the spiritual meaning of the snake. So beyond the single spiral, we find variations of the spiral symbol in ancient artwork all over the world. There's the double spiral, which amplifies that idea of duality and brings two polarities together. It speaks to any cycle that goes from one extreme to the other and pendulums back and forth, the cycle of night and day or the cycle of summer to winter. Then there's the Celtic triskelion, which brings the spiral from duality to the Trinity concept, the sacred threesome. In Celtic tradition, it represents earth, sea, and sky. It can represent life, death, and rebirth. A lot of powerful meanings are connected with this symbol. The Christian Trinity being one, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and there are so many more. We also see spirals spiraling in both directions at once. In nature, we see this in pine cones and sunflowers, where the spiral is going both ways simultaneously. And this pattern contains incredible energy. You can think of it as the spiral energy on steroids. And here's something important. While we can translate the spiral's meaning into mental concepts, it's even more powerful to work with the spiral with your body, either visually using your eyes or by walking a labyrinth or by tracing it with your finger. This generates an energy that we can tap into and work with through our physical body. Working with the energy of the spiral transcends ideas and is incredibly, incredibly powerful. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to do this a little differently than your typical explainer video. I'm going to continue to use words to explore the spiritual and psychological meanings of the spiral, but I also want you to experience the spiral directly. So I'd like to invite you to grab a piece of paper and something to draw with, a pen, pencil, colored pencils, or paints, if you want to get fancy. If you don't have anything handy to draw with, that's all right. You can trace along with your finger on your leg or on the table. The key is to involve your body and your breath, because when you do, you're actually going to feel the power of this symbol working in your energy field. Ready? Let's begin. Take your pen and start right in the center. We're going to draw a spiral together, and it doesn't matter which direction you go. Think of this as a little game. You want to draw it as tightly as possible without touching the lines, keeping those lines separate, maintaining a clear path. As you continue spiraling, you might find that your spiral takes on a different shape, and that's perfectly okay. It may not be perfectly even, and that's fine too. Just keep going because as we spiral outward, the symbol itself begins to speak to us and to disclose its meaning. As we go around and around, we begin to recognize something. It's like the cycles of nature coming round again and round again. This is one of the great meanings of the spiral, the rhythm of the universe, the law of cycles. What goes up must come down. We see this in the cycles of the year and the day, which at first seem like circles. But once we've been around the sun a few times, we realize it's more of a spiral because we never experience the same cycle in exactly the same way. We're growing. And so we see things from a different perspective. At the same time that it's going around and around, it's also progressing, and we begin to understand that there are cycles in our lives too. Whether it's our spiritual journey, goals we're working toward, a career, a relationship, or a project, there's a cyclical nature to growth. The spiral tells us about growth and expansion. When we work with this outward spiral, wisdom is encoded within it about the nature of growth and the journey of life. Have you ever noticed when you're working towards something, often it seems like you're making progress, and then suddenly the universe throws you a curveball and things seem to go backwards? The trajectory of growth is often two steps forward, one step back. But in the spiral, we can see that even though we're progressing in a certain direction, much of that time, if you're just on the level of the paper, you might seem to be going backwards. You have to take a step back and take in the big picture, the big perspective, to see that yes, you actually are progressing. The spiral teaches us patience. It helps us develop faith that whatever we're going through at the moment isn't always the big picture of the growth we're actually experiencing. It shows us that sometimes going backwards or experiencing difficulties or challenges is necessary to the progression. So rather than seeing things as calamities when they come up, we can remember the spiral and say to ourselves, this is part of the process. This is life. This is how life unfolds. Just because things seem to be going backwards doesn't mean we're not progressing. We just have to move through that backward time. We can approach it with a sense of equanimity, knowing that a little backwards movement doesn't negate our progress. Keep drawing, breathe deeper, allow the breath to move the pen. As we continue to expand the spiral outward, we can start to see the light and the dark in it, the process of rhythm, back and forth, yin and yang. We can see the dualism happening right before us, but then at the same time, there's this unity. The spiral itself shows us oneness. Here, the spiral is showing us the unity of universal consciousness and the power of life itself, the life force in nature or universal mind, always expanding in a rhythmic pattern. Now, if this is an expanding spiral, we can also spiral the other way. See, we have a choice. We can choose to spiral in or spiral out. Have you ever had a time in your life where you felt like things were spiraling out of control? What happens when we get into that downward spiral? When we work with the spiral backwards and forwards, we can see that we actually have the power of choice. The life force that's part of us is going to go in one direction or another, but we have a lot of agency in how we direct it. Sometimes when we're working with spirals, it may trigger emotions or thoughts. The encouragement is as you keep drawing, tracing this line around and around, breathe. When thoughts come up, refocus and redirect your attention back to the spiral. If you notice thoughts coming up that are negative, that's a sign of spiraling back. Because if we allow those thoughts to continue running rampant, we get released into that downward spiral. That's a clue that the thoughts running in your mind aren't really yours, not thoughts coming from your higher self, your true self. Negative spiraling thoughts only happen when you've allowed some kind of mental spam bot to take over. And there's no blame here. It happens to every one of us, but it's just a reflection of some kind of a wounding or trauma that you've experienced, something out of the past. But remember that we don't live in the past. We live right now in the present. And that's where we can take our power back. Remember that we're not our thoughts. We're the consciousness that observes and directs the thoughts. And we can choose which thoughts are worth hanging on to. When thoughts come into our heads, it's up to us to discern if those thoughts are actually positive and constructive or if they're negative. Sometimes we have thoughts replaying times that we felt disrespected or wronged. It's really easy to replay that over and over. And what happens then? We're in a downward spiral. It's like a broken vinyl record that has a scratch. An old-fashioned record has a spiral that looks a lot like this, and when it's scratched, it starts playing the same thing over and over and over again. The spiral reminds us that we can catch those thoughts and recognize when we're on some kind of a replay. Even if somebody has wronged you in the past, when we focus on that wrongdoing and how we were wounded, when we put that at the center of the spiral, that just keeps the wound wide open and keeps the effect of that growing. So the antidote to that, what can jumpstart that spiral to start spinning upwards again, is forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you condone what the person did, and it doesn't mean you have to stay in that situation or maintain the relationship the way it was. Forgiveness is a letting go of the bond. It's booting them out of your spiral, even if you keep them in your life. It's understanding that that person has their own karma, that the universe will take care of any justice that needs to be done to them. It releases you from having to be the judge. So, what we do then is we refocus. What we put our attention on grows, and it will eventually show up in our life in one way or another. We can release the blame and refocus. Ask yourself, where do you want to send your attention? Put that at the center, not the wound, and let that positive thought spiral out and grow. Coming back to our own power, to the center of the circle, refocus. Find what belongs at the center of your circle, that thing that helps you grow and that you want to see more of in your life. For some people, it's nature. For some, it's Jesus or some kind of fulfilling work or your art or your family, whatever brings you joy and meaning and helps you feel good and positive. The spiral teaches us agency. When things are spinning out of control, there's always a way to spin it back. Even if things really are out of your control, we still can control our reaction to them to start spiraling up again. So the next time you find yourself doodling a spiral, or you notice one in nature, or you feel like things are spiraling in your life, remember you have the power to choose the direction. You can spiral inward for reflection and release, or spiral outward for growth and expansion. The spiral reminds us that growth isn't linear, that setbacks are part of the process, and that we always have agency in directing our life force. Thank you for spiraling with me today. I hope that you felt the power of the sacred symbol. If you did, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to explore more sacred symbols and spiritual awakening, subscribe to this channel. Until next time, keep spiraling upward and remember you were born to be free.